families need that security of knowing that they've got a place for their children to go, that it's safe, it's well maintained, they're going to get education and not just screen time sitting over in the corner. So we have championed those efforts and have been, kind of carved out our space as a statewide advocate in connecting the business community to this work. So we've used our foundation as a catapult for this over the last few years. The first fundraising that we did post disaster, we raised about $260,000 in, the first 5 or 6 days after the storm. So our foundation board met and we tried to figure out what we could do with that kind of money at that time. And they said, let's be what we are about. And we are about childcare in our communities.
This is the Chamber Chat Podcast, the show dedicated to chamber professionals to spark ideas and to get actionable tips and strategies to better serve your members and community. Hello, Chamber Champions. Welcome to Chamber Chat Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Burton, and here on the podcast, I introduce you to people and ideas to better help you serve your chamber members and your community. You're joining us for a special episode in our 2026 ACCE Chamber of the Year Finalist Series. And joining us today is David Jackson, President and CEO of the Boone Area Chamber of Commerce in North Carolina, and one of the High Country's most influential community advocates. Since taking the helm of the chamber in 2016, David has helped drive initiatives that strengthen economic development, support local businesses, and enhance quality of life throughout the Boone region. His leadership has helped position the organization as a trusted partner in addressing community opportunities and challenges while earning recognition as the 2025 Carolina's Outstanding Chamber of the Year. David's commitment to community service extends well beyond the chamber. He serves on numerous local and regional boards and commissions, contributes to economic development efforts across the High Country, and teaches as an adjunct professor at Appalachian State University's Walker College of Business. His impact has been recognized through several honors, including being named Community Advocate of the Year by the North Carolina Rural Center and receiving both the Town of Boone 1872 Award and the Community Inspiration Award in 2025. Before leading the chamber, David spent 16 years with Appalachian State Athletics, including a decade as Associate Athletic Director. Many listeners may recognize his familiar voice from behind the microphone, where he built an award-winning broadcast career, earning 2 North Carolina Sportscasters of the Year honors. Today, he continues to be a familiar voice for App State Athletics and the Carolina Panthers. Whether discussing leadership, community growth, economic development, or the future of the High Country, David brings a unique perspective shaped by decades of service, storytelling, and engagement. Let's welcome back David Jackson. David, love to give you an opportunity to say hello to all the chamber champions who are out there listening and share something interesting about yourself so you can get to know you even better.
Yeah, well, it's great to be back. Always good to see an email pop up from you in the inbox, but it's also great to be in a space where you can talk to people that understand the work that we do on a daily basis. So so in thinking about the next fun fact here, I actually got into the broadcast side that you were talking about by growing up in a household where my dad was a local television weatherman. He served as meteorologist at WFMY TV in Greensboro for a little over 20 years and had about 30 years in the industry. So we moved to North Carolina in 1982, right after Michael Jordan hit the shot that gave North Carolina the national championship and made him a little bit famous. And that kind of solidified my love for sports in a new area. But yeah, so I used to go back to work with my dad at night and sneak out of the weather office and go hang out with the sports guys. And that's kind of where my career interest got started.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm curious, did your dad have to change his name as a weatherman? You see all these,
No, he had a plain enough name that was okay. So he didn't have a stage name or anything like that. But it's interesting. He got started in sports as well, and was the radio station director. He went to Southern Illinois in Carbondale, and was the sports director at the radio station and called games for the Salukis. So when I was working at App State after he left TV weather, I actually had him join our broadcast crew as our sideline reporter, and we worked together for about a decade in that way. So he actually continued on with the network after I left. So
Okay.
he was my inside scoop for information there for a while. But it was a fun opportunity to work with a parent, and anything, let alone something like that, was really special.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I know we just recently had you on. I say recently, it was I guess December of 2025 that your previous episode aired on the podcast. But you're definitely a familiar voice and face on Chamber Chat podcast. But for those who maybe missed that episode or tune in, especially for these Chamber of the Year finalist series, tell us about the Boone Area Chamber to give us perspective, the size of your chamber, staff, scope of work, budget you guys work with, just to kind of set the stage for our.
Yeah, sure. So the Boone Area Chamber of Commerce is located in the mountains of Northwest North Carolina in Watauga County. We are on the state line of Tennessee and are real close to the Virginia border. So if you think about the triangle where North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia come together up there in the Northwest, we are located in that region of the state. About an hour and 45 minutes northwest of Charlotte, about an hour and 45 minutes west of Greensboro. So beautiful area of the mountains. We're at about 3,500 feet up here, and enjoy the mountain climate. We're in rainforest season right now, which is good because we were also experiencing drought conditions. So rain right now is Chamber of Commerce weather. Our organization has about 700 members, give or take on the day. You all understand that. Our budget annually for the C6 side of the house is about 850,000 in terms of revenue, and that number has grown some over the years. We've got a staff of 8 full-time employees and a couple of part-time employees at this point. And in the last 2.5 years or so, we've taken on a 501c3 foundation, which was very helpful to us in the recovery from Hurricane Helene. I know we talked about that a lot in the last episode, but that has made for us to have between a 1.75 and $2 million organization totally. If you use Mike Gelman terminology, our full organization runs right around 2 million and has a lot of philanthropic tie into it as well. So we've evolved in that way in the last 3 to 4 years, and really feel like we are a different organization now than we were 5 years ago.
I'm sure you feel just more solid, more strength behind that with having more of that infrastructure built out. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that throughout this episode as well.
Yeah.
That definitely does help to set the stage, though. So for these Chamber of the Year finalist episodes, what I'd really like to spend the bulk of our time on is the programs of work that were submitted on your Chamber of the Year application. So as I understand, just from a high level, you guys have a child care program that we'll address that ties into your economic development initiatives, and also a community resilience fund that, if I'm not mistaken, came out of the Helene recovery efforts. So we'll dive in deeper on the details of those two programs as soon as I get back from this quick break.
Hi, I'm Joe.
And I'm Rose.
And we're the founders of At My Community, a mobile app that can be customized to meet the unique needs of your Chamber of Commerce.
When we started At My Community, we envisioned a tool that would help communities thrive by simplifying communication and enhancing engagement. Chambers of Commerce face unique challenges, and we're here to help you tackle them.
At My Community helps the Evergreen Area Chamber of Commerce to create an app that keeps tourists informed even when their office is closed. They provide 24/7 access to local business information, which helps support the local economy and community engagement.
In Rocky Mountain House, we helped Rocky Chamber create an app with dynamic itineraries and digital resources for tourists, increasing local business engagement. The app has become an essential tool for the community, promoting events and boosting visibility for local merchants.
Today, we empower more than 200 chambers of commerce, campgrounds, and RV resorts to streamline communication, informing members about events, sharing business updates, and providing a digital hub for the community, all in one convenient app.
When you partner with At My Community, our team works closely with you to create an app that meets your chamber's unique needs. As your community grows, our app evolves with you. We are here to ensure you engage effectively with your members and streamline your operations.
Schedule a demo today at atmycommunity.com.
We can't wait to meet you.
Are you ready to take your organization's funding to the next level? Hi, I'm Clint Neesmith, CEO of Resource Development Group. As a Chamber of Commerce or Economic Development Organization leader, I know you understand the value of working with experts who understand your world. And that's exactly what RDG does best. For over 30 years, RDG has specialized in fundraising for EDOs and chambers. We bring cutting-edge strategies tailored to your organization, whether you're just starting out or gearing up for yet another new funding cycle. Importantly, our firm executives are hands-on from start to finish, from the feasibility study to the successful conclusion of your fundraising campaign. And our team brings deep industry roots and national expertise to every engagement. No matter the size of your community, RDG delivers data-driven, innovative revenue solutions, reinforcing ROI to investors and making sure your vision becomes reality. At RDG, we proudly build organizations that build communities. Visit us today at rdgfundraising.com and let us partner with you, building a stronger future for your organization and the community you are working to grow and develop.
All right, David, we're back. As I mentioned before the break, kind of hitting on the two programs that were submitted on your Chamber of the Year application. I don't know if you have a preference on which one you want to address first in our discussion today.
Yeah, we can start with whichever one you would like to.
All right. Well, let's attack the child care front. I know that tends to be something nationwide that there's issues with. So hopefully there's some good things that listeners can learn from.
Yeah, so we touched on this the last time we talked a little bit. Most chambers and economic development organizations, if you haven't been involved in this space, you're warming up to it. Now that early childhood development and child care in general is an essential piece of economic development strategy. We have been involved in this conversation in our community for nearly a decade now. We had our Smart Start agency, got together a group of business leaders and business owners and just community influencers a little over 9 years ago now, and just said, hey, we need to do an asset map. We need to first of all help you connect the dots why childcare is essential for businesses that may not even have employees with children, why this is such an important fabric of our community. So we really took that on as a challenge to try to help message that to our business community, just the essential workforce that industry represents, but then also shining some light on how porous that industry was. You were talking about solid foundations earlier, and I don't know if there's a state in the country that can claim that they've got a solid foundation underneath their early child care system. Here in North Carolina, there is a state subsidy floor that is actually being debated in the General Assembly as we speak that has not been reset in about 6 years. So when you start thinking about the cost of doing business for the business and getting full cost of care for the children that they are caring for, they are missing the mark by a lot. And that doesn't even account for the inflationary increases that we've seen, over the last 18 months or so. So this industry is in a very difficult situation for its own solvency, yet we rely on these centers and these workers nurturing our children at their most vulnerable time of brain development, trying to get them ready for pre-K and kindergarten and on into third grade assessments. But we also know that without those businesses, we have no business. We have so many people in this particular community. Dual family career households are the norm. You cannot afford to live here on one income. So families need that security of knowing that they've got a place for their children to go, that it's safe, it's well maintained, they're going to get education and not just screen time sitting over in the corner. So we have championed those efforts and have been, kind of carved out our space as a statewide advocate in connecting the business community to this work. So we have used our foundation as a catapult for this over the last few years. I'll take it back to Helene for a second, and that the first fundraising that we did post disaster, we raised about $260,000 in the first 5 or 6 days after the storm. So our foundation board met, and we tried to figure out what we could do with that kind of money at that time, and they said, let's be what we are about, and we are about childcare in our community. So we were able to take the majority of those funds and combine them with another grant that the Smart Start agency had, and got about $235,000 out the door within a few days after the storm to pay off the October tuition debt for families that had children in early child care facilities in our community. That not only freed up short-term cash for those families to address emerging hurricane repair needs, but it also helped make sure that the business model of early childhood was still intact when everybody came back to work in November. So we've made it now an October tradition to fundraise for a unique project within the early childhood landscape. Last year, we did a fundraising project for a Child Care for Child Care Workers initiative. And this year, we just recently announced that we're doing a one-time retention bonus for child care staff that have been at 6-month, 1 year, and 2-year plus increments. And so we're trying to raise somewhere in the neighborhood of $65,000 to do a one-time retention bonus for those staff members to show them, number one, that the community cares about them, that they see them. This is often a very overlooked element of our workforce, but that too, the centers can use this as a retention bonus. And as we're looking at the fluctuation of education professionals at this time of year, those that maybe have enough education and background to get into a teaching assistant position in the county, those child care centers need to keep that staff. And we hope that this is an enticement that can keep folks working, put a little bit more money in their pockets right before the holidays, and again, shine a bright spotlight on a very critical element of our workforce here in our community.
Yeah. Just this last weekend, I was having a conversation with a friend. He and his wife are just a young couple, and they just had their second child. And they both have their own careers and everything, but now they're debating, does the wife go back to work, or, trying to weigh out the childcare costs versus what the income levels are. And that's kind of that threshold where it's like, so then you're pulling from the workforce and all that. So childcare is so important to address. I'm curious with your approach, like you talked about the one-time retention bonus and the annual fundraising around childcare. What kind of childcare facilities would qualify? Is it just any licensed facility within the county, or is it like the home daycare places? Would they qualify? Like, what's that threshold?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it speaks to how every state is aligned a little bit differently too. So in our case, we are allocating these funds to licensed care facilities, both the traditional centers that you think about, but also the in-home care centers that also have to go through a licensure, qualification here in North Carolina. And we found when we did child care for child care workers. So I'll back up and say that we have always picked for these now 2 years and even take it to Helene, we have picked things that have had some sort of a legislative priority or are a priority of the advocates within the industry. So certainly Helene recovery was at the top of the list back in October of 2024 throughout Western North Carolina. And there are still some centers that have not reopened yet because of the damage that they sustained during that period of time. When we've looked at these last 2 years, we have gone back to that same advocacy group and said, all right, tell us what your priorities are. Well, Child Care for Child Care Workers was about having a pilot program where we could, and this is another program that's being debated in our state General Assembly now, about funding the slots that are taken by workers from those facilities. So in some cases, a center staff member is taking one of their own children into that same center, and rather than them just giving their paycheck right back to their boss, essentially for the reasons that you just articulated, there is a push in North Carolina to try to create a fund where those funds could at least be partially subsidized, if not fully paid for those staff members. Again, in the spirit of workforce retention and recruitment, but also a healthy stabilizer for the child care business, because what we found was that a number of those facility owners were writing that cost off anyway. You're looking at a business model that has about a 1% profit margin to it. They can't afford to give away too much. So it does, those payments went directly to the centers to offset income that would be coming from the family, and everybody kind of won there. And then we authored a white paper and sent that to our General Assembly members and said, here's what we learned. And one of the things we learned was that the in-home child care centers could not take advantage of that because they didn't really have a staff. There was just one person with about 5 kids. And so we were able to help them understand that if that was going to be a legislative priority, there had to be some sort of set aside or carve out or at least acknowledgement of the fact that not every business within the industry operates the same way. So that's been helpful. It's kept us in very close contact with legislators as we're looking at the overall systemic issues there. And another thing I'd point out quickly is the regulatory aspect of this. When we think regulation, a lot of people's minds go straight to safety. There is nothing being discussed in our state about changing the safety standards around how children are cared for. As a matter of fact, it's going in the other direction and really leaning into ways that children can be cared for as safely as possible. But what we have noticed in our state, and we have heard this from other states around us, is the duality of some of this regulation and the contradiction that comes from that. And what I mean by that is we've got a very real scenario here in our county where there is a person that comes in and does the license requirement review for one set of standards. They will then leave the facility, go sit in their car, eat their lunch, come back inside the center and judge that same business off of a completely different set of standards for another licensure requirement. And oftentimes those things are contradictory. And we're talking about things like
Nuts.
the food quality of lunches and some of the fundamental things around building structure, access points. Those things all tie to safety, and we don't want to see any of that change. But some of the paperwork chase that is involved in this industry is enough to take up one, if not two staff members. And again, these are businesses that run very lean because the profit margin is next to nothing. So we are involved in this in the foundational sense and trying to support this industry and lend some voice to an industry that doesn't have time for the voice. We're fortunate that we have a well-placed board member of ours that is in some of the statewide decisions on one of Governor Stein's task force initiatives for this. So we're able to be, kind of at the ground level of some of the substantive conversation that's coming up in the legislative pipeline. And then again, to close this, all of this is being done to support an industry that supports every other industry here in our community. And anytime there's a center closure or a hiccup in the system, it snows and the centers close, we find out real quick just how valuable that business line is to our community, especially a rural community like ours.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you guys have definitely done your homework and you know the industry, very well. I was going to say inside and out, but I'm sure there's some things, still room to learn more about it, but definitely making an impact there. Let's shift gears a bit to the other program of work that was submitted around your Community Resilience Fund. If you want to tell us what that is and how that came to be.
Yeah, so we submitted some information about our hurricane response, as all chambers and no matter what community you're in. I want to shout out Sharifa Jones out in Iowa, who has been just a wonderful resource for us here in North Carolina. They were a few months ahead of us on a disaster claim due to a flood. And just
Yeah.
being able to benchmark where they are versus where we're going. She has been just a wonderful resource. So to shout out to Sharifa, but in that spirit, as we're thinking about how we responded to that, both from a monetary standpoint, from an advocacy standpoint, we are involved. I'm a member of Governor Stein's task force for Western North Carolina recovery. It's about 50 people across all kinds of business scopes, as you would imagine. So we get a chance on a monthly basis to meet and chart different areas of Western North Carolina's recovery. And then my area of focus is with a number of professionals on the long-term economic recovery. One of the things that we have learned in this is that as FEMA is being reshaped in front of us nationally, and really that process started as we were getting started with our recovery here in Western North Carolina. You can play the timing of that. I think I said on the last episode, never have your natural disaster in the middle of a contentious presidential election.
That's
That's what
right.
we could have written
Plan
our
for that.
thesis on
Yeah.
that, right? But what we found in the process is that in our state, communities are going to be tasked with the rapid response element, both from a personal side through the LTRGs and any kind of business support is going to have to come as rapid response from the community itself. We have long noted and have beaten our heads up against the wall about business support coming from disaster funding. We have yet to see any kind of federal allocation. We've received one state allocation through the governor's office to a nonprofit that was able to dole out some funds. But every time that we've gone back to say, hey, we need to get these businesses back on their feet again so they can continue to create the tax revenue that these local rural communities need to survive, we get, sorry, we can't give money directly to businesses from the state government. There's an emoluments clause in North Carolina that prevents that. So all of that said, we have started working on the local answers. So we raised about $1.4 million and distributed that through disaster grant funding to small businesses from our chamber. We had a lot of philanthropic interest in that, of course, but we had a lot of donors that there in the onset of the storm, the heartstrings attachment to our area. It was $10, $25, $100 donations that made up a large pot that we were able to distribute disaster grants through 4 funding rounds. We are now looking at reshaping that program to be a community resilience and stability program where we know that we've got dollars that we can fundraise for throughout the year. It's not sexy fundraising. We understand that. But we want to have at least a pool of money to where when the next disaster strikes, whatever that happens to be, we've got some deployable funds immediately available to us. And then we can fundraise to refill that off of whatever happened. But it's just about having rapid action cash that a lot of communities don't have available to them when a business burns down due to a fire or there is an economic disruption of some sort. So we're in the process of migrating our disaster grant program into this more, kind of 365-day a year evergreen community resilience fund, and then thinking out how we can allocate those funds. So we anticipate, and our foundation board's working through this now, of probably having about 80% of those funds attached to the disaster need and defining what disasters are, but then thinking that we've got 20% of that funding that can be microloans or micro grants to the business that is still struggling at a time like this. We have not been dealt any favors economically from our hurricane disaster on top of a difficult winter, on top of gas prices raising, on top of in a tourism dependent economy. So we want to create some things that could be, a micro grant to a business that needs a little bit of a boost, could be professional development funding for a group that needs to be trained in a certain way to handle new circumstances. We've got some flexibility there, and that's really given us some opportunity to dream a bit about what, we could work off the interest on something like that. We're still kind of in the formative stage of all of that, but the synopsis that we wrote was that, not only was this funding necessary in the immediate, but we also all need to think about how these funds are deployed in our community outside of the federally declared disaster. And if the federal government's not going to declare them in the same way, surely our states are not yet understanding of what that looks like for them. So again, we can't wait on anybody else. We've got to create the case that this kind of funding is needed. It's separate from the personal lines that again are handled by the long-term recovery groups, but very much works in concert with those things. And hopefully we can create a scenario where our community feels like we've got a little bit of a tool that we can use until larger help arrives. And something we did not have before the hurricane, that kept us from getting resources out for weeks. Now we'd like to create a situation where, hey, within a couple of days, we're stroking a check, we're helping somebody out and getting them a few steps farther down the road to recovery in a way that does not lock them out from any other funding moving forward.
Yeah. I like the self-reliance aspect of taking care of your community, taking care of your own first and not needing to sit around and wait for federal aid to come in. And hopefully it does come, but you're not going to sit around and wait for it.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned that. Go ahead.
Yeah. Just to say real quick, I think part of what we've learned in the last couple of years and where Sharif has been helpful and several others around the country that have gone through these kinds of things is to understand the level of red tape that exists with all of these programs. Certainly, and understandably so. We're all smart enough in this industry to understand why federal funds have the extra hoops to jump through, right? And some of our state funding is like that. And even some of our local funding, depending on where it's passing through, gets bogged down in the quagmire of paperwork. But what we are hopeful in that we can come up with a trustworthy but simple process where we're not bogging people down with chasing every piece of paper that they've ever had with their business. There needs to be some truthful understanding of where they are and why they are in the situation that they're in. But we're hopeful to create a scenario where we're able to get funds to people quickly because we're taking away some of those barriers. And part of that I think goes back to the nature of our business, and that's the relationships. to sit around a room where grants are being allocated and say, oh, I know that business and I know their last 5-year history and I know that their son is just getting ready to take it over or what have you. That's valuable information that I think that we in our industry take for granted sometimes when we
True.
can just have that kind of top of mind. Oh, yes, this is my community. I understand it and I can get to yes faster because I've been paying attention. And I think so many of us are in that position where we all have this crazy amount of information in our brains that we don't know when we're going to need it. Well, you need it at a time like that. And I think that's where our
CRM doesn't
organization can be very helpful.
carry all that information that's in your
Yeah,
head, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So you'd mentioned that the fundraising for it is not necessarily sexy, and I know coming out of the storm, there was the obvious need. You could say you could have things to point to and say this is why we're fundraising. You get that support of $10 here, $20 there, $1,000, all over the board. But going forward, when you don't have that initial, emotional moment that pulls on the heartstrings, what does that fundraising look like that is not sexy?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question, and it's an answer that we don't really have fully addressed yet. We're in the relationship building stage of that right now, so we're just shy of 2 years out from our disaster, and again, as we benchmark against other communities that have been through similar things, we've got Gatlinburg not far from here from the fires that they went through, several years back now. In talking to some of these professionals and the businesses around there, we find that now is the time to make the deep philanthropic relationships work. So our state is actually being helpful with that. The governor's task force is trying to bring in some national and even international philanthropic efforts to Western North Carolina recovery, but they are doing a great job of making sure that those folks are meeting local contacts on the ground. And as we all know, in the grant funding world, there's a bucket over here and a bucket over here, and those two buckets can't pour into the same thing, but they can pour into similar things. So you might meet somebody that is controlling bucket number one, and one day they will say, hey, but bucket number two is now available and that one's for you. So I think the relationship building piece of it is the work that nobody ever sees. It's the work that you don't write the press release on, but it is essential to the next step. So
Yeah.
we have been really working that right now, trying to get out in front of people what the true conditions are on the ground. And I've found that that's the toughest message to communicate. It's the road is fixed, the ground may be healed over a little bit, and people can't see necessarily as easily the impacts of that disaster from 2 years ago. But we all in this industry know that the economic ramifications from that kind of disruption take years to get over, and we're in the middle of that right now. We've got businesses that any disruption is a magnified disruption. We had a rainy Memorial Day weekend that really put a damper on our retail and
Yeah.
tourism based industries. We had snow on every Friday in January. That does not work well for the ski industry here because the roads were not accessible for people to get to the area. So we've had to fight some curveballs off and foul a few pitches off, but we're hopeful that through relationship equity, through our state continuing to support the region, we can make some of the relationships that will then decide to learn more about our communities. And then we get in a storytelling mode, which we all know we can flip that switch on, and we're all passionate about the things that our community needs. And that's what we're hoping is the next step in all of this, and are starting to make some inroads in that direction.
Yeah. Very good. Well, I love how both of these programs show that you guys have, a vision for the future. You guys are, creating that roadmap going forward to make sure that your business community and the local economy there is going to be as sound as possible because of the efforts that the chamber's making. So kudos to you guys for being that, foresight kind of thinking. As we begin to wrap things up, I wanted to ask you on behalf of those listening, what kind of tip or action item would you leave for the chamber out there listening who wants to take their organization up to the next level?
Yeah, that's a great question too. We, going back to the Chamber of the Year finalists piece, we set into that process to learn. We had just gone through a program here in North Carolina called Family Forward, which is a certification that you can get if you have some HR principles, for the most part, that are in alignment with family forward practices and policies. Everything from making sure that you're offering maternity and paternity leave to how you're dealing with all kinds of staff retention initiatives and things along those lines. So when we went through that process, we got certified, but we saw some things that we wanted to change, and that led us down a road with policies and procedures, and then that led us down a road of membership retention and recruitment and some of our internal chamber strategies. So when it got to time for the ACCE submissions, we thought, well, we've done a lot of work. Let's just see where we are. Let's see how we benchmark against some other peer organizations, and we're going to rely on that feedback. And little did we know that we got to this stage, but we are as excited to get to New Orleans to learn as much as anything. And I think that's my advice, is to go into it hoping to get better through the process, whether you get selected, whether you, and this could be your state organizations or any type of way that you can say, are we on the right path? And can we judge that against organizations that do something similarly? Because there really are no organizations like ours. It's not like you can look down the street and say, hey, there's a business in the building next door. Let's see how our sales match up. That's not what the chambers are. So I think it's one of the most helpful things with ACCE has been to do that with like peer sets, and whether that's budget, type of community, size of population, all those types of things, to be able to go in and look under the hood and say, hey, yeah, we do these things really well, but here's some areas that we can learn from some others on how we can just get better as an organization. And as I mentioned, we've had a lot of change here in the last 4 years, added staff, new building, new foundation, hurricane recovery. It's time for us to take that look and say, where are we, and how can we become the chamber of the future, knowing that some of the methods and methodology of the past is no longer going to be something that we can count on. So that's part of the process. I think if you enter into it with that constant mindset of nothing is sacred, everything deserves to look under the hood every once in a while, and you can get better for that. I think that's what we're most excited about, being involved in this process.
I think that's great advice, and it's a great perspective to take, going into this kind of process. I know I had asked you before when you were on the show, but I like asking, whenever I have somebody on the show, how do you see the future of chambers and their purpose going forward?
I think my answer has changed in the last 6 months. We are in a very odd economic time around the country, and I think everybody's got their version of this right now. We are in a tourism-dependent area, though we are trying to diversify our economy, and I think I touched on that last time, that we've had 2 major disruptions in the last 6 years that have shown us what major pieces of our or what our community looks like when major pieces are turned off. We are in a university town with Appalachian State. When the university goes away and tourism goes away, we become very quiet and very, very isolated. So we have been thinking about that economic diversification at a time where everything costs more. So while we're championing the business startup and the entrepreneurial effort and trying to get some of that intellectual property off of campus and into businesses, we know that we're encouraging people to do this at a time that it costs more than ever to do these things. And I think that the future version of the chamber world has to be one where you're getting the real-time information and reacting off of that real-time look. I don't think that we can sit here and say today, I know I can't, from our seat, what our community is going to look like 365 days from now. There are a lot of ifs that come into that, more so than ever that I've experienced in the 10 years of being in this job. We have to be really good at anticipating the if scenarios and helping people see, all right, here's option A, or here's what could happen if these things fall into place, and here's option B, and so on and so forth. And not do that as a scare tactic by any stretch, but helping people, taking that helpful, nurturing nature of ourselves and being just a little bit more detailed with that, and being able to go to a business and say, all right, if we have a strong summer, this is what you're looking at in terms of size of events or whatever your thing might be. And if we take a step back, here are some tools and resources that we can go ahead and get introduced to you. It's so much more personal, and people are tired. In a community that's gone through COVID and a natural disaster, people are short. They are frustrated. They're tired of being in the same place of kind of spinning wheels. And we have to be kind of the psychologist to say, it's okay.
Yeah.
Everybody else is dealing with this, and we can help you. but we've got to be able to match the help that the moment needs, not what a book 10 years ago told us about, because that book is no longer valid. I think there's been
Right.
some great conversation within the industry on your podcast and other sources that are encouraging us to think about how we evolve. And I think that conversation is as relevant as it's ever been. And I'm looking forward to getting to New Orleans and hearing where other people are with that. Because I think this is
Yeah.
a real critical time once again for us to prove our worth like we did back during COVID. Whatever the next 6 months looks like or the next year looks like, as we head closer to the midterms, we have an opportunity to be the industry that helps people make sense of it all. And I think if we're committed to that, we're going to come out on the other side even stronger than we are.
I love that response. Very, very good. Well, David, before I let you go, I want to give you an opportunity to share any contact information for listeners who may want to reach out and learn more about how you guys are doing things there in Boone. Where would you point them and what would be the
Yeah,
best way
sure.
to connect?
So boonechamber.com is our address. Don't confuse us with Boone, Iowa. We get calls for each other all the time, and we have a good relationship there. We're all named after the same guy. So, celebrate Daniel Boone in whatever part of the country that you would like to. But we are Boone, North Carolina. Boonechamber.com is our address. You can learn more about what we're doing with our foundation. And anybody that would like to have a quick chat and talk a little bit about initiatives, and if you've got advice for us, we're all ears for it. But we love talking with people in the profession. Again, we all know that this is a small world, a small universe. I've got my IOM shirt on here. Shout out Tucson Class 4, getting ready to head out there to finish things up this year. But we know that the more we talk and communicate, the stronger that we all are. And I'm so thankful for our Western North Carolina Chamber brethren that have helped shepherd us through this time, and for all of the people that have poured into us over the last couple of years. We're here today because of that, and we want to be that resource to anybody else that we can ever help. So just reach out anytime. And Brandon, always great to talk to you, and continued best of luck with the podcast, and know that we're out there listening every week.
I appreciate that so much. And best of luck to you and your team. And again, congratulations being selected as a Chamber of the Year finalist.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, good luck in New Orleans.
If you are a chamber professional, be sure to subscribe to Chamber Chat Podcast on your favorite podcast app or now on YouTube, so you never miss a new episode. New episodes are released each week and delivered right to you. If you're finding value in the podcast, please take a moment to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. It really helps others discover the show. And most importantly, share Chamber Chat Podcast with your colleagues in the industry so we can continue to grow and strengthen the chamber community together.
One thing I see over and over with chambers is a big focus on talent attraction and workforce development. But what often gets overlooked is retention. That's where Mike Conn really brings something different to the table.
When you invest in people, you know what happens? Their leadership increases exponentially. And when you help leadership increase exponentially on an individual level, an organizational level, a community level, then the culture just gets better and better and better.
Mike gives businesses practical tools to build stronger culture, improve communication, and actually keep the great people they've worked so hard to attract. If you're looking for a way to bring real tangible value to your members through workforce and talent retention, and even earn some non-dues revenue in the process, then what Mike has to offer is a game changer. To learn more, visit chamberchatpodcast.com/Mike Conn to learn more about all that Mike has to offer.